Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into Vikram Seth's brilliantly constructed satirical poem, The Tale of Melon City. Now, on the surface, this just reads like a fun, humorous, almost folklore-like fable written in verse. But right beneath that entertaining exterior lies a really sharp, deeply critical analysis of governance, leadership, and the genuine dangers of blind obedience. Seth uses this deliberately absurd chain of events to expose what happens when systems of power completely lose their grip on reason. It's an absolutely fantastic piece of literature, and we're going to break down exactly how it works.
So, let's anchor ourselves to one central question right off the bat. What actually happens when a justice system is entirely devoid of common sense? We're about to look at a story where a society's blind adherence to rules, traditions, and the mere appearance of justice leads to, well, ultimate disaster. It's basically the ultimate cautionary tale about prioritizing mechanics over actual meaning.
You've got to appreciate the intense irony built into the very first description we get of our main character. He's called a just and placid king. I mean, he wants everyone to believe he's deeply committed to fairness, calm, and reason, right? But as you'll see in just a second, this self-proclaimed placid ruler is literally anything but. He's actually super fickle, incredibly impulsive, and deeply, deeply insecure about how his subjects perceive him.
Okay, so the inciting incident of our story kicks off with a massive construction project. The king orders this grand, triumphal arch to be built spanning the major thoroughfare of the city. And the stated goal here, as the text notes, is to edify spectators. Basically, to beautify the city, impress the public, and visually project the sheer grandeur of his reign. But at its core, this arch is really just a giant monument to his own misplaced royal pride.
But here's the catch, and honestly the trigger for this whole crisis is hilarious. The arch is built entirely too low. So, as the king rides triumphantly underneath it, the low-hanging structure knocks his crown right off his head. Instantly, that supposedly placid demeanor totally vanishes. His royal ego is completely shattered. A totally insignificant architectural error suddenly transforms into this massive, urgent political crisis just because the king feels humiliated in front of his people.
What follows is the absolute ultimate bureaucratic blame game. Furious, the king demands that the person responsible must be hanged. But obviously nobody wants to take the fall, so the responsibility just shifts in this perfect domino effect. The king summons the chief builder, who immediately blames the workmen. The workmen plead that, hey, the bricks were the wrong size, shifting the blame to the masons. The trembling masons then point the finger at the architect. And the architect? He cleverly reminds the king that His Majesty himself actually made amendments to the plans. So the blame goes full circle, right back to the king.
Let's just pause here and contrast these two approaches to justice. In a system of true justice, a problem occurs, you conduct a rational investigation, you establish actual responsibility, and then you deliver justice. But the king? He's practicing what we can call mechanical justice. There's a problem, he completely skips the investigation, demands immediate blame, and jumps straight to severe punishment. It is literally justice applied entirely without reason.
Finding himself trapped as the guy who actually amended the plans, the king totally panics. He admits this is a tricky thing and demands counsel from the wisest man in the country. And the man they find is so incredibly old, he can neither walk nor see, and he has to be physically carried into the royal court. The sheer absurdity here is the assumption that extreme old age just automatically equals profound wisdom.
And, true to form, this supposedly wise man offers a spectacularly ridiculous solution. He croaks out that the real culprit is the inanimate arch itself, because, it was the arch that banged the crown off. Therefore, the arch must be hanged. They literally lead a piece of architecture to the scaffold. But before they can figure out how to hang a stone arch, a counselor intervenes in absolute horror, pointing out that it would be deeply shameful to hang something that has touched the royal head.
Now, all this back and forth is taking time, and the crowd watching this circus is getting incredibly restless. They're muttering aloud, essentially waiting for an execution. The king perceives this shifting mood, and he's absolutely terrified of looking unjust or weak. Driven entirely by his own insecurity and public opinion, he abandons all remaining shreds of logic. He declares that the nation wants a hanging, so someone, literally anyone, must be hanged immediately. The finer points of guilt be damned.
This panic builds to the ultimate climax of situational irony. The scaffold and noose are all set up, but they're built somewhat high. They go around testing the noose on various people, but it only fits one man in the entire assembled crowd, the king himself. Because he was the only person whose height actually fit this high noose, the king is led to the gallows and executed. His blind insistence on an arbitrary, mechanical form of justice literally becomes the mechanism of his own death.
So, with the king dead, the passive ministers face a major constitutional crisis. They need a new monarch. Do they convene a council? Do they look for a wise, capable leader? Nope. Completely dependent on blind tradition rather than independent political judgment, they just enforce an old custom. The rule states that the very next person to pass the city gate gets to choose the new ruler of the state.
The resolution to this crisis is just a fantastic, hilarious punchline. The first person to wander past the city gate happens to be the town idiot. When the guards demand that he name the next king, he simply replies, "A melon." It turns out this is his standard answer to absolutely all questions, just because he really likes melons. And the ministers, being perfectly content to follow the letter of the law without applying a single ounce of critical thought, literally carry a melon to the throne and crown it king.
I mean, it's a totally laugh-out-loud image, but the symbolism here is razor-sharp. The Melon King represents meaningless authority and entirely incompetent leadership. It's the ultimate symbol of passive governance and the absolute emptiness of political power when a society is guided by nothing but the blind acceptance of tradition. The melon perfectly highlights how absurd a system becomes when rules are followed without a single drop of human reasoning.
Now, you might expect the citizens to riot against being ruled by a piece of fruit, right? But they don't. The citizens are actually perfectly happy. And this brings us to the principle of laissez-faire, which literally translates to let do or non-interference. The people have absolutely no complaints about their melon king because it gives them total peace and liberty. The melon doesn't raise taxes, it doesn't start wars, and it certainly doesn't build dangerously low arches. It simply leaves them alone.
But Vikram Seth isn't just making a joke here. He's making us confront a very real societal issue. He forces us to look at two contrasting ideas, a peaceful society versus a well-governed society. In the poem, the citizens have definitely achieved peace, but it's a peace built entirely on public apathy and zero government action. It really forces us to ask ourselves, is a society actually functional if its only requirement for leadership is absolute non-interference? Is a society truly well-governed if the people simply just don't care?
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for today. If citizens only care about being left completely alone, does it actually matter who sits on the throne? Vikram Seth's The Tale of Melon City uses brilliant humor to warn us about the ultimate price of civic apathy. When authority lacks wisdom, justice lacks reason, and citizens completely refuse to engage critically with their government, the distinction between a human king and a literal melon becomes terrifyingly non-existent. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.